I still remember the weight of that bourbon bottle in my hands, heavier than glass had any right to feel. I'd carried it across 3 states, through flight delays and sleepless terminals, imagining the look on my husband's face when he saw me standing there at his cabin door. I wanted that moment, his surprise, his laughter, his arms wrapping around me, to make up for the growing silence between us. But the moment never came. Because before I could knock, I heard his voice through the door, calm, casual, and utterly unrecognizable. If she vanished, that insurance money could clear my debts. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard. Then a man laughed, one of his friends, I assumed, and said, "Or finally date her sister guilt-free." The laughter that followed shattered something inside me. I froze, every nerve in my body going still, my pulse roaring in my ears. The bourbon slipped slightly in my grasp, the red ribbon I'd tied around the neck of the bottle brushing against my wrist like a mocking gesture. I felt my smile fade, my breath catch, and my world tilt. In that instant, the woman I had been, the trusting wife, the loyal supporter, began to dissolve. David had always been charming. That was how it started at a charity gala 3 years earlier. I was 29, the daughter of a real estate magnate who'd built his empire from nothing. I'd grown up around power money people who smiled too wide when they wanted something from my father. But David was different. He seemed uninterested in wealth. He talked about dreams, ambition, his MBA, the business he wanted to start. He looked at me like I was a person, not an investment. Or at least that's what I believed. My father didn't. Sophia, he'd said before the wedding, love shouldn't require financial sacrifice. If a man truly loves you, he'll want to protect you, not be protected by you. But I thought he was being cynical. I thought David just needed time to find his footing. So when he hesitated about signing a prenup, I defended him. When he said it made him feel like I didn't trust him, I melted. I was naive enough to think trust was the same as love. It wasn't. Over the next 2 years, I poured money into his consulting business. When clients fell through, I covered the bills. I paid off his student loans as a first anniversary gift. I bought the house he wanted, the one he claimed would make him feel like a provider. Every time he stumbled, I was there to catch him, believing that was what a good wife did. My sister Amelia had her doubts. "He asks a lot about our family's finances," she'd said one afternoon, her voice careful, gentle. "About the trust. About the estate. It's odd." I'd laughed it off, brushing away her worry like a mosquito. "He's just trying to understand our world," I'd said. But standing outside that cabin, listening to his voice drift through the cracks in the wood, I realized Amelia hadn't been protective. She'd been right. The sound of shuffling cards and male laughter filled the air. The smell of wood smoke mixed with bourbon and betrayal. "How much is the policy for?" again one of them asked. "2 million. David replied, his tone light. "Took some convincing to get her to sign the papers. Told her it was about our future family." A roar built in my chest, part disbelief, part rage, part heartbreak. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth to keep from making a sound. In that moment, 1,000 memories rearranged themselves into something darker: the hiking trip, where he'd urged me to pose closer to the cliff's edge. The boating accident last summer, when I'd nearly drowned while he'd been on a call. His sudden interest in adrenaline sports, skydiving, mountain climbing, anything that could go wrong. It all made sense now. He hadn't been seeking adventure, he'd been seeking an accident. The bourbon felt radioactive in my hand. I set it down gently by the door, peeled off the little note that said, "To my love," and stared at my reflection in the cabin window. My wedding ring caught the porch light, that flawless diamond that once symbolized forever, and all I could think was how artificial it looked, how cold. Through the fogged glass I saw him, my husband, the man I'd trusted with my heart and my inheritance. He was smiling, carefree, his arms slung over the chair as he played cards, laughing with the men who now knew more about my worth than my worth to him. Something inside me broke cleanly like glass under pressure. I backed away from the cabin, my shoes crunching against the gravel. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't scream or pound on the door or demand answers. I just walked numb, mechanical, until the cabin was a smear of yellow light behind me. I left the bourbon and my suitcase at the door. I left my ring in the cup holder of my rental car. And I left behind the woman who'd believed love could save her. Driving down that narrow mountain road, I felt both empty and electrified. My breath came shallow, but my thoughts were sharp. I wasn't going to be his victim, not his mistake. If he wanted me gone so badly, I'd give him exactly that, but on my terms. By dawn, I was on a plane to Costa Rica. One-way ticket, no forwarding address. By the time he returned home, I would be officially missing. Let him panic. Let him face the police, the debts, the whispers. Let him wonder what went wrong. He'd underestimated the wrong woman. The airport was a blur, boarding gates, fluorescent lights, the stale smell of coffee and disinfectant. I sat in a corner seat by the window watching the sunrise stain the clouds orange. My hands still shook, but not from fear. From control. From purpose. Every step I took now mattered. I called my assistant Megan. I need you to cancel all my meetings and tell everyone you haven't heard from me since yesterday. No questions, Megan. Her voice trembled. Miss Reynolds, are you safe? I will be. When I hung up, I turned off my regular phone and pulled out a prepaid one I just bought. Then I took a deep breath, the first real one since the cabin, and boarded my flight. 16 hours and 3 connections later, I stepped out into humid Costa Rican air. The ocean smelled like salt and possibility. My luggage was laughably light, 3 dresses, my passport, and $10,000 in cash, withdrawn from an account David didn't know existed. The taxi driver didn't speak much English, which was perfect. I showed him the name of a small seaside hotel I'd found during my layover, Playa Hermosa room with ocean view. Not the kind of place David would ever think to look for me. The woman at the front desk looked at me red-eyed, exhausted, holding myself together by threads, and simply nodded. We have a quiet room, she said, for peace. I hesitated before signing the guest card, my pen hovering above the paper. For the first time in years, I didn't write Sophia Carter. I wrote my maiden name, Sophia Reynolds. It felt like reclaiming oxygen. The room was small white walls, a rattan chair, a single bed draped in a blue coverlet. A ceiling fan turned lazily overhead. Beyond the balcony, the ocean stretched endless and forgiving. I dropped my bag on the floor and opened the doors to the sea breeze. It hit my face soft and warm like an embrace. I stood there until my knees gave out and I sank onto the floor, staring at the horizon, as the realization settled in my husband wanted me dead. Not metaphorically, literally. The sobs came then, raw, ugly, unstoppable. I buried my face in my hands and cried until I had no breath left. I cried for the woman who had believed in him, for the dreams I'd built around his promises, for the blindness I'd mistaken for love. When the tears finally stopped, the silence felt heavier than sound. I stumbled to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, my hair tangled, my lips pale. But behind the wreckage, something new flickered. Not strength, not yet, but clarity. He had wanted my end. He would get my beginning instead. That night, I lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to the rhythm of waves outside. For the first time in my life, there was no plan, no schedule, no one waiting for me to perform. Just me, stripped bare, invisible to the world. I whispered into the darkness, "You don't get to decide how my story ends." It wasn't defiance yet, but it was a start. Morning came wrapped in soft gold light and the scent of salt. For a few blissful seconds before my thoughts caught up to me, I forgot. I stared at the ceiling fan turning lazily above my head, the rhythmic whir hypnotic, and I could almost believe I was just another traveler starting a vacation. Then the memory flooded back, the cabin door, the laughter, the words that had torn the ground from beneath my feet. I sat up slowly, feeling the ache in my chest. The world outside my window looked painfully beautiful. Sunlight glinting off the waterbirds, calling from the trees, life continuing as if mine hadn't just imploded. I walked barefoot to the balcony, hugging my knees as the waves rolled in. Each one seemed to whisper the same thing, "You're still here." A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. When I opened the door, the woman from the front desk stood there with a tray, coffee, toast, and fruit. "On the house," she said gently. "First morning is always the hardest." Her kindness nearly undid me. "Thank you," I whispered. She smiled, the kind of knowing smile that only comes from experience, and said, "You're not the first woman to wash up here trying to start again. You won't be the last." After she left, I sat on the little balcony sipping coffee that was far too strong and sweet. The sea breeze tangled my hair, and the world began to feel slightly more real again. Beneath the pain, there was something else, a quiet pulse of possibility. For years, I'd defined myself by being David's wife. My goals, my choices, even my appearance had bent around his orbit. Without realizing it, I'd given up everything that had once made me me. But now, stripped of everything, my house, my husband, my name, I finally had space to ask who was I before him. Over the next few days, I found small answers in silence. Mornings became ritual. The hotel owner, her name was also Sophia, as I later learned, would bring me coffee and fruit, then leave me to the sunrise. I'd sit and watch the light shift from pale pink to fierce orange, breathing deeply, grounding myself in the present moment. When the grief came, it came in waves, sometimes sharp like glass in my lungs, sometimes dull and heavy like dragging a stone through water. But in between, something new began to take root, a sense of control. On the third day, Sophia knocked again. "Walk with me," she said. We walked barefoot along the shoreline, the wet sand cool under our feet. For a while, she didn't speak. Then, as if sensing the question I hadn't asked, she said, "I bought this hotel 20 years ago, after my husband left me for my cousin." I looked at her, startled. She gave a small shrug. It broke me. For a while, I thought I would die from it. But then I realized the best revenge wasn't destroying him. It was living well, happily, freely. She stopped and faced me, her eyes steady. "Costa Rica has a way of rebuilding broken women, if you let it." That night, I thought about her words. Living well as revenge. It sounded almost poetic, but right then, I couldn't imagine happiness. My heart still pulsed with betrayal. My love had turned into a weapon he'd planned to use against me. How do you rebuild after that? The next morning, I tried to answer by simply stepping outside. I walked along the beach until the world stopped spinning. The sand clung to my feet, the surf rushed over my ankles, and the warmth of the sun touched my shoulders like forgiveness. A vendor was setting up a fruit stand. "Buenos dias," he said, slicing a ripe mango and offering me a piece. The sweetness exploded on my tongue, vibrant, alive, a reminder that pleasure still existed. I smiled for the first time in days. It became another ritual. Morning walks, fresh fruit, polite nods to strangers who didn't know my story. Each day I felt a little lighter. After a week, I passed a small salon tucked between a souvenir shop and a cafe. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of my reflection, long hair tied neatly back the same way David liked it. He used to say my hair was my crown, that he loved it long and perfect. But looking at myself then, I saw how much of me had been shaped to please him. Before I could talk myself out of it, I pushed open the door. The stylist, a young woman with bright blue streaks in her hair, looked up and smiled. "Can I help you?" "I want it gone," I said. "All of it." Her eyebrows lifted. "Are you sure?" "Completely." She didn't question me further. The sound of scissors cutting through my hair was like liberation, snip by snip, strand by strand, shedding the version of myself that had lived for someone else's approval. When she finally turned me toward the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. My hair fell in soft, uneven layers that framed my face. I looked younger, sharper, free. "You're beautiful," the stylist said simply. I smiled, not the polite, practiced smile I'd worn for years, but something genuine. "Thank you. I finally feel it." When I stepped back into the sunlight, the world seemed brighter. I wandered into a small boutique nearby and bought a few local pieces: loose linen pants, colorful cotton tops, handmade sandals. I threw away half the clothes I'd brought from home. The silk blouses, the designer heels, they felt like relics from another lifetime. That evening, when Sophia saw me at dinner, she nodded approvingly. "Now you look like you belong here," she said. "I'm starting to feel like I do," I admitted. Days slipped into weeks. My grief softened around the edges, replaced by something calmer. One afternoon, wandering down a quiet street, I stumbled upon a tiny art gallery. Inside, paintings of beaches, forests, and faces filled the walls, vibrant, alive, pulsing with emotion. An elderly man sat in the corner sketching. "You like art?" he asked in accented English. "I used to," I said, my voice distant. "A long time ago." He gestured for me to sit. "Show me." He handed me a pencil and a small sketchbook. My hand hesitated at first, but soon muscle memory took over. Lines became shapes, shapes became waves, and I felt my mind quiet in a way it hadn't in months. You have talent, the man said softly when I finished. Come back tomorrow, I teach you more. And so I did, every day. His name was Miguel, and his little gallery became my refuge. He taught me to see light again, how it bends around edges, softens, shadows, deepens color. As I painted, I felt pieces of myself returning one brushstroke at a time. You paint with sadness, Miguel said one afternoon studying my canvas, but also with strength. That is good. Real art tells the truth. His words stayed with me. I realized that was what I wanted, not revenge, not escape, but truth. 3 weeks after I'd left home, I finally logged into my email at the hotel's front desk computer. There were hundreds of messages, friends, family, my sister, and David. The subject lines told a story all their own. Where are you? Please call me. The police are looking for you. The last email forwarded to the police described me as emotionally fragile and possibly suicidal. I stared at the words until the screen blurred. He wasn't just playing the grieving husband. He was controlling the narrative, painting me as unstable, ensuring that if I ever returned, no one would believe me. Then I opened our joint bank account. The balance was zero. Every cent I'd transferred from my trust for business investments had been moved 2 days after I vanished, to an account I didn't recognize. A hollow laugh escaped me. Of course he'd waste no time. For a moment the despair threatened to swallow me. Then something else rose up, colder, sharper, steadier. If he thought I was gone, I could use that. That night I sat on the balcony, the ocean reflecting moonlight like scattered silver. Sophia joined me, carrying 2 glasses of local wine. You look different tonight, she said. I made a decision, I replied, my voice steady. She raised an eyebrow. To do what? To stop running. She smiled faintly and lifted her glass. To phoenixes, then rising from ashes. I clinked my glass against hers. The burn of the wine down my throat felt like a promise. The woman who had fled in the night was gone. The woman sitting there now, quiet, watchful, calculating, was someone else entirely. Someone reborn. This wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about fighting back. Over the next few days, I felt something shift inside me, a transformation both frightening and liberating. My mornings still began with coffee and ocean air, but the peace was sharper, now purposeful. I wasn't just healing anymore. I was planning. Every heartbeat, every sunrise, every quiet hour became fuel for what came next. The first thing I needed was information. The truth, not just what I'd overheard, but everything that lay beneath it. My father used to say, never strike until you've studied your opponent completely. And David, for all his charm, had become my opponent. I reached out to my attorney through an encrypted email account I'd set up years ago for emergencies. My message was short. Need confidential consultation. Assume digital compromise. Respond only through this secure channel. Within hours, I had a reply from Evelyn, a woman who had managed my trust fund since I was 21. Her loyalty was to my family, not to David. I told her I needed to review certain financial accounts but couldn't do so in person. She didn't ask why. That was the thing about women like Evelyn. They knew when not to ask. Next, I contacted someone I never thought I'd call again. Carlos Mendez, a private investigator who had once worked for my father during a corporate fraud case. I still remembered him, calm, deliberate, with eyes that missed nothing. Carlos, I wrote, I need everything. Discreetly. When his reply came, it was simple. Understood. Consider it done. It should have made me feel safer. Instead, I felt the weight of what I was about to uncover pressing on my chest. That afternoon, I lay in the hammock on my balcony, listening to the ocean hum its endless rhythm, when my prepaid phone rang. I hadn't given that number to anyone except Megan, my assistant. My pulse jumped. Miss Reynolds, came her trembling voice. I'm so sorry to disturb you, but there's someone here who needs to speak with you. She says it's urgent. Before I could ask who, there was a rustle, then another voice, shaky, emotional, immediately familiar. Sophia. Oh my God. You're alive. Rebecca. My sister-in-law, David's younger sister. Rebecca, I breathed, my chest tightened. How did you? I've been trying to find you for weeks, she said, voice breaking. David said you disappeared, that you might have hurt yourself. But I knew that couldn't be true. Something's wrong. I can feel it. I sat up, heart pounding. Rebecca, slow down. Tell me what's happening. There are men at David's house, she said, voice quivering. Dangerous men. They say he owes them money, a lot of money. They threatened him, Sophia. They said if he doesn't pay in 3 days, they'll make an example of him. And if they can't find him, they'll come after me. My house, my job, everything. Her words hit like thunder. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. How much? I asked quietly. 300,000, she whispered. Gambling debts. I had no idea it was this bad. Gambling. Of course. The missing funds, the constant talk about investments, the unexplainable expenses, it all made sense now. He hadn't lost money in business. He'd lost it in casinos and high-stakes poker rooms. And now the predators were circling. Where is he now? I asked. At home, drinking? He's falling apart. The police are questioning him about your disappearance. He's terrified, Sophia. They think he might have hurt you. A bitter laugh escaped me. How ironic. Rebecca didn't seem to hear. I'm scared, Sophia. For him, for me. I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes. The rational part of me screamed that this wasn't my problem. David's mess. David's consequences. Let him drown in the chaos he created. But Rebecca's voice, trembling, loyal, terrified, tugged at something softer in me. She had been kind to me when no one else in his family had. She didn't deserve this. Does he know you're calling me? I asked. No, she said quickly. He'd kill me if he knew. But please, if there's anything you can do. I hesitated. I'll think about it, I said finally. I'll call you back on this number. Before she could answer, I ended the call. For several minutes, I just sat there staring at the ocean. The smart move would be to disappear again, to stay hidden until David's lies consumed him. But then I remembered the way Rebecca had once defended me at Thanksgiving, when his mother made snide remarks about my wealth. She had hugged me after whispering, "Ignore her. You're family now." And now she was begging me for help. I stood and walked down to the beach, letting the waves rush over my ankles. The water was warm, soothing, but my mind was a storm. Helping him even indirectly went against everything my pride demanded. Yet letting Rebecca suffer because of his sins felt cruel, and cruelty was something I refused to let define me. I called Evelyn first, confirming what I already knew: David had drained every joint account and attempted to access one of my personal trusts. She'd blocked it in time. Then I called Carlos. Can I pay someone's debt without revealing my identity? He paused. It's possible. Complicated, but possible. Why? I need to make sure the right people get paid anonymously. Are we talking charity or leverage? Justice, I said quietly, the clean kind. 2 hours and several encrypted messages later, I had my answer. I could transfer the funds through a third-party escrow. The creditors would be paid. David would never know who'd done it. When I called Rebecca back, she answered on the first ring. I'll take care of the debt, I said. Her voice broke. Sophia, I don't even know what to say. But there are conditions, I interrupted. 3 of them. Anything. First, David never knows the money came from me. As far as he's concerned, I'm still missing. Second, you get him into rehab. A real one, not some weekend detox. Third, you sell your house and move somewhere he can't find you. Silence stretched between us. You think he'd hurt me? She whispered. I think desperate men are unpredictable, I said. And David is very desperate. She exhaled shakily. Okay, I'll do it. All of it. I almost hung up, but then she said something that stopped me cold. Sophia, why did you leave like that? What happened? I closed my eyes. Let's just say I heard something I wasn't meant to hear. Another pause. Then hesitantly, was it about me? My grip tightened around the phone. What do you mean? David, she said quietly. He's always had this idea that you and I were close. Too close. He used to tell people you reminded him of me, that we were the same. I didn't think much of it, but my blood ran cold. The voice from the cabin echoed in my mind, or finally date her sister guilt-free. Only Rebecca wasn't my sister. Not my sister, his. Oh my God, I whispered. Rebecca's voice trembled. He told me you had paranoid episodes, that you'd accused him of things that weren't real, that you were unstable. I didn't believe him, but he made it sound so convincing. The fury that rose inside me was like ice sharp, clean focused. Not only had he plotted my death, he'd laid the groundwork to make everyone doubt me. I'm going to help you, Rebecca, I said, my voice steady as steel. But when this is over, we need to talk about your brother. The truth, all of it. When I hung up, the wind off the ocean had turned colder. I stood there staring at the horizon until the last light bled from the sky. He'd stolen my money. He'd smeared my name. He'd plotted my death. But he had no idea who he was up against now. The next morning, I awoke to an email from Carlos marked confidential urgent. His report was attached. My hands trembled as I opened it, bracing myself for what I was about to see. It was worse than I'd imagined. I sat on the balcony with my laptop, the sea whispering below, and opened Carlos's report with trembling hands. For several minutes I just stared at the file name, David Carter Comprehensive Findings, before I finally clicked. What loaded on the screen wasn't a report. It was an autopsy of my marriage. The first page showed financial records. I scanned the numbers, my pulse thudding as realization dawned. 3 months after our wedding, David had taken out a new life insurance policy in my name, one I'd never seen or signed. The signature on the form was a near-perfect forgery of my own. The payout, $5 million. The listed beneficiary, David Carter. My vision blurred, my stomach twisted. I thought back to every adventure he'd pushed me towards: skydiving, cliff hiking, scuba diving. All the near misses, the accidents, the moments that could have easily gone wrong. It hadn't been spontaneity, it had been rehearsal. The next file contained phone logs. Hundreds of text messages. Many between David and my sister Amelia. My breath caught. At first, the messages were innocuous questions about family dinners, casual jokes, but once I started reading closely, I saw it: the manipulation, the way he tested boundaries, slipping compliments disguised as flattery. "You and Sophia are so different. You actually understand me. She's been distant lately. I wish I could talk to you instead." Amelia's responses were polite, restrained, but as the messages continued, her tone hardened. The final text she sent him, dated 3 weeks before my trip, read, "David, I think it's inappropriate that you keep contacting me privately. Please stop." A small sob escaped me, part heartbreak, part relief. My sister hadn't betrayed me. She'd tried to protect me in her own quiet way. Then came the financial trail. My trust fund transfers, business investments that led to shell companies under his name. There were purchases from jewelry stores I'd never visited, hotel stays in cities I hadn't been to, and thousands withdrawn from casino ATMs. There were transfers to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, the balance sitting at $1.2 million from money I had believed was helping his business recover. Each page was a knife cutting away what was left of my denial. But the final document was the one that took my breath away. A draft email recovered from his deleted folder, addressed to my father's attorney. "Dear Mr. Langford, I wanted to clarify a few points regarding Sophia's trust. In the unfortunate event of her passing, would I retain control of her assets until such time as the estate is settled?" The email was dated 3 weeks before his cabin trip. I didn't make it to the end of the sentence before I was on the bathroom floor, retching until my stomach was empty. When I finally stopped, I leaned against the cool tile, shaking from exhaustion and fury. The man I had loved, defended, and built a life with had been planning my death in spreadsheets and forged signatures. When I could finally stand again, I looked at myself in the mirror, pale, hollow-eyed, trembling, and whispered, "No more." That evening I told Sophia everything. She sat beside me in silence as I spoke, her weathered hand resting on mine. When I finished, she sighed deep and sad. "Men like that," she said, "they never stop until someone makes them. You have to decide if you want peace or justice." "Why not both?" I said quietly. The next morning, I sent Carlos new instructions. Organize the evidence into a single irrefutable package: bank statements, emails, policy documents, everything. I wanted multiple copies in multiple locations. One for my lawyer, one for law enforcement, one locked away to be released if anything ever happened to me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure he could never hurt another woman the way he'd hurt me. But still, there was one thing left: that justice alone couldn't give me closure. And closure required confrontation. I spent the next week preparing meticulously. I closed every financial loophole, froze the offshore account, and filed preliminary documentation for divorce under my maiden name. Every decision was precise, deliberate, and cold. My father had once told me that emotion was the enemy of strategy, but for the first time I understood that emotion, when controlled, could be power. I changed my appearance further, bought brown contact lenses, dyed my hair a darker shade, more earth than gold. The woman who would soon face David wasn't the same one who had once stood at that cabin door trembling. Before I left Costa Rica, I made one final visit to Miguel's art studio. He smiled when he saw me. "You've changed," he said. "I found my subject," I replied. What is it, Justice? He laughed softly. Then paint with truth and don't flinch from it. That night, as I packed my bag, Sophia appeared at my door holding a small box. Inside was a delicate silver charm bracelet. For protection, she said. My grandmother gave it to me when my husband left. It helped me remember my strength. I clasped it around my wrist, touched beyond words. Thank you for everything. She hugged me tightly. Go do what needs to be done. Then come back and start living. I promised her I would. The flight home felt surreal. I'd left the country as a broken woman and was returning as something else entirely, stronger, sharper, dangerous in the ways I'd once been naive. At the airport, I didn't use my married name. I checked in as Sophia Reynolds carried only a single piece of luggage and wore sunglasses that hid more than my eyes. When the plane touched down, I didn't go home. Not yet. I checked into a small downtown hotel under an alias and opened my laptop. The city lights outside glimmered through the blinds as I reviewed everything one last time. The plan had to be flawless. Carlos confirmed via encrypted message that Rebecca was safe. She'd moved in with a friend and enrolled David in a private rehab center, though he was already threatening to leave. The anonymous debt payment had gone through. He believed some family friend had stepped in out of pity. He was unraveling, drinking heavily, paranoid, and according to Rebecca, starting to make threats about finding Sophia. Perfect. I waited another 48 hours before making my move. During that time, I contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division anonymously. I didn't name him directly, just pointed them toward the offshore accounts, forged insurance documents, and suspicious transfers. Enough to light a fuse. Then the final piece. I called my sister Amelia through an encrypted line. When she answered, her breath hitched. Sophia. Is it really you? Yes, I'm safe, but I can't explain everything yet. Oh my God, everyone thinks. I know what they think. Let them. It's better that way for now. She exhaled shakily. What's happening? What do you need? I need you to tell me the truth. Has David been in contact with you? A pause. Then quietly, he calls every day. At first, it was about you crying, desperate. Then he started saying strange things, that maybe we should meet to talk privately, that we'd both lost someone we loved. My stomach turned. Amelia. I said, listen to me carefully. You're not safe around him. Keep your distance. Don't agree to see him, not even for a minute. I won't, she said. Then after a pause, Sophia, I always thought something was wrong with him. I just didn't know how to tell you. Tears burned my eyes, I know, and I'm sorry I didn't listen. We said our goodbyes and I turned off the phone. My heart was pounding, but not from fear anymore, from anticipation. The time for hiding was over. The next day I rented a car, an unremarkable gray sedan with cash, and drove toward the neighborhood that had once been my home. The streets looked the same, but I wasn't the same woman who'd driven them. The trees swayed gently under the streetlights, the air cool and sharp. When I reached the house, I parked a block away. The Tudor-style home glowed with warm light, the facade still picture-perfect. I watched from the shadows unseen. Through the window, David paced, phone pressed to his ear, his movements agitated. Even from a distance, I could see the unshaven jaw, the whiskey glass in his hand. He looked smaller somehow, weaker. For a moment, I felt a pang of something that almost resembled pity. Almost. Then I remembered the cabin, the laughter, the forged documents. Pity evaporated. Tomorrow the performance would end. Tomorrow I would walk through that door one last time. Not as his wife, not as his victim, but as his reckoning. The night before the confrontation, I barely slept. I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my small hotel room, rehearsing every word I'd say, every possible outcome. There was no room for mistakes now. I wasn't walking into an argument, I was walking into a battlefield. One I had prepared for with precision. By morning, the fear that had once ruled me was gone. All that remained was a strange calm, like the stillness before a storm. I dressed simply, dark jeans, a pale blouse, and the silver charm bracelet Sophia had given me. My only piece of armor. I looked in the mirror one last time, barely recognizing the woman staring back. She looked composed, cold, powerful. When the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, I drove back to the house that had once been my home. The fountain David had insisted on installing still glittered under the lights, absurdly ornate, a monument to his ego. The air smelled faintly of whiskey and rain. I didn't use my key. That house no longer belonged to me. Instead, I rang the doorbell. It was strange how steady my hands were. Inside, I heard footsteps, uneven, hesitant. Then the door opened. David stood there. For a brief second, he didn't recognize me. My shorter, darker hair, my altered eyes, the unfamiliar calm in my face. Then the color drained from his cheeks as recognition struck. "Sophia," he whispered, voice barely audible. "You're alive." "In the flesh," I said. My voice was quiet but firm. "We need to talk." He stepped back, automatically, still in shock. I walked past him without waiting for permission, my heels clicking on the marble floor. The house smelled stale sweat, alcohol, and something sour like decay. "You've been gone for weeks," he stammered, trailing behind me. "The police thought—" "They thought you killed me," I finished. His mouth fell open. "What? No, I've been going insane trying to find you. I was terrified. Terrified the truth would come out," I cut in. He froze, blinking rapidly. "What are you talking about?" I turned to face him. The look on his face was almost comical, the same expression he'd used 100 times to manipulate me. The tilted head, the softened eyes, the slight tremor in his voice. I could almost hear him calculating what version of himself to play next. "Don't bother," I said. "The performance is over." He frowned. "Sophia, listen. I was at the cabin, David." The words dropped between us like a grenade. He stilled. For a moment only, the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. The cabin. I heard everything, every word. About the insurance money, about your debts, about how my disappearance would solve your problems. His face paled. Then almost instantly he recovered, slipping back into the practiced charm that had fooled me for years. "Oh my God, that was a joke, dark humor between guys, you know how it is." "A joke," I repeated flatly. "And your friend's comment about dating my sister guilt-free, was that a joke too?" He hesitated. Not your sister, I mean." "Rebecca," I finished for him. His eyes widened in panic. "Yes, David. She told me everything. How you manipulated her. How you told her I was unstable, paranoid, delusional." "That's not true," he snapped, anger flashing in his voice. "You don't know what you're saying." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "No, David. For the first time in years, I know exactly what I'm saying." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "You want to talk about truth? Here it is." He frowned, his gaze flicking between my face and the envelope. "What's that?" "Everything I said. Every lie. Every theft. Every forgery. The fake insurance policy you signed in my name. The offshore accounts. The emails to my father's lawyer asking about my trust fund after my death. Every piece of proof is in here." He stared at me, stunned. Then the mask slipped, his features hardened, voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "You've been spying on me." "I've been surviving you," I corrected. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You think anyone's going to believe you? You vanished for weeks. Everyone thinks you're mentally unstable. I made sure of that." "Yes," I said softly. "You did. And that's exactly what makes this so satisfying." I set my phone on the table and pressed play. His voice filled the room, calm, confident, unmistakable. A recorded call with the insurance agent discussing the increase to my policy. The agent's concerned questions, David's lies smooth and rehearsed. As his own voice echoed back at him, his bravado cracked. "Where did you—" "Doesn't matter," I said. "You signed the divorce papers before I walked in here. All you have to do now is finish them." "Divorce papers." I took out another document and laid it on the table. "Sign these and you walk away with nothing. Refuse and the FBI, the insurance company, and every bank you've defrauded get copies of everything. I've already made sure they'll be delivered if anything happens to me." His jaw tightened. "You wouldn't dare." I smiled faintly. "You should know better than anyone, David. I don't bluff." He stood there, breathing hard, weighing his options. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. Finally, his shoulders slumped. He picked up the pen. His hand trembled as he signed each page. When it was done, he looked up at me with something like disbelief. "What happens now?" "Now," I said quietly. "Now you get to live with the consequences of your own choices." At that moment, the doorbell rang. David flinched. "Who's that?" "Your sister," I said simply. His face twisted. "You brought her here?" "She deserves to see the truth, too." I walked to the door and opened it. Rebecca stood there pale and nervous, clutching her purse. When she saw me, she froze, her eyes welling with tears. "Sophia," she whispered, "you came back." "I promised I would," I said. She stepped inside, glancing warily at her brother, David. He turned away, shame and fury warring across his face. "You shouldn't have come." "No," she said quietly. "I should have. You've been lying to me my whole life." "Rebecca, no." Her voice cracked, but her eyes burned. "You used me. You made me feel responsible for you. You told me Sophia was crazy, that she was paranoid. When the truth is, you were the one destroying everything." For once, David didn't speak. He just stood there, silent, cornered, defeated. I gathered the signed papers into my bag and looked at him one last time. "You have 30 days to leave the state. Your debts have been paid anonymously. The people you owe won't be coming back. But if you so much as send me or Rebecca a single message, those documents go public." He glared at me, the mask gone completely now. "You think you've won?" I tilted my head. "No, I think I've survived. That's better." Rebecca followed me out to the driveway, the night air cool against our faces. Neither of us spoke until we reached the car. Then softly she asked, "You could have destroyed him. Why didn't you?" I looked up at the house that had once symbolized everything I thought I wanted. "Because revenge keeps you tied to the person who hurt you," I said. "And I've wasted enough of my life on him." She nodded slowly. "What will you do now?" "Live," I said simply. "On my own terms." 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new beachfront studio in Costa Rica, the ocean glittering gold beneath the setting sun. My easel stood before me, holding a canvas I'd just finished, a woman walking away from a house of shattered glass. It was the most honest thing I'd ever painted. Behind me, Sophia, the hotel owner who had become like family, appeared with 2 glasses of wine. "Your gallery opening next week," she said, smiling. "Every painting already sold." I laughed softly. "That still doesn't feel real." "You earned it." She handed me a glass. "And your sister, she's coming." "Yes," I said, smiling at the thought. "And Rebecca, too. She's in Colorado now, running a little bookstore. Happy, finally." Sophia raised her glass. "To new beginnings." I clinked mine against hers, "and to bourbon left behind." She laughed, and for a while we just stood there in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn to fire. The air was warm, the waves steady, the world simple again. I thought about David sometimes, about how his story must have ended after the FBI started investigating the fraud. But only briefly. He was part of a life I'd outgrown, a chapter closed. As the last light faded, I set down my wine and touched the charm bracelet at my wrist, a reminder of survival, of rebirth, of the woman I had fought to become. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't making someone pay for what they've done. It's refusing to let what they've done define who you become. If you've ever survived betrayal, heartbreak, or loss, remember, your story doesn't end where they left you. It begins where you find yourself again. If my story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe, and tell me in the comments what rebirth means to you.